Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at The Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
I'm Pete Wright, further cementing this movie as a Kobe Smulders vehicle. Maria Hill gets the slow walk away.
That's right. Today we are talking about minute 133, which begins with Hill's questions for Fury and ends with repairs on Tony's penthouse. Joining us on the show for the first time this season, Andrew and Joe Darowski. Hello, you two.
Hello.
Hello.
Unreal. Where have you guys been? There's like hot Avengers action going on.
We wanted to save it for the very last moment. Swoop in, save the day. Swoop out.
Perfect. Just like a superhero would do. That is awesome. Fantastic. Well, we're coming in here. This is definitely kind of the big final moment. You know, Fury just had his final words with the World Security Council, and we come in kind of closing out that power walk that Fury has out of his little meeting room with them. And then, you know, while Alan Silvestri's fantastic score is kind of pumping, and then we end up going into the bridge and we have this conversation. It's kind of a wrap-up conversation between Hill and Fury that kind of sets up structure for future films, the team, the idea of the Avengers. I mean, what do you think of this? How do you like the way that this sequence kind of wraps up the film?
I think it's a good sequence if you don't know exactly what your next Avenger story is going to be.
Very open-ended.
A little bit, yeah. When you have Fury saying things, you know, the line that I love the most, it just, I don't know, it sounds so great coming out of Samuel L. Jackson's mouth. But when you think about what it actually means, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, because Fury's like, they'll come back. And she's like, sure about that? He's like, I am. And she says, why? And his response, because we'll need them to. And that's our closing.
So, either they'll come back or we'll never know.
We'll never know.
So talking about like the way they exchange lines, I rewatched the whole movie to get ready for this, and it reminded me of something that is, I mean, I'd say it's consistent with the writers of this film and other works that they've worked on. But all throughout this movie, I was just like, can anyone just say what they mean? Can you just say it clearly? Like, stop making a euphemism, stop being cute. She's like, if we ever have a situation again like this, it's like, can you just say, what happens if what do we do if this happens again? Like, say it straight.
What if aliens come out of the sky again and blow up our city?
Like, what if we ever have a situation? It's like,
yeah.
Why can't you say it? You were there.
Yeah. Because the answer is, Andrew, they can't. They can't do that. Because it's in universe.
Well, and also, like for Nick Fury, I think he could just say, "We will call on them." You know, like I organized this time. I manipulated them. You know, to do what we needed them to do. I'm still here. I will just do that again.
Yeah. Putting blood on the playing cards. I'm not above that yet. Like, I'll do it again.
It is such a funny kind of wrap up for everything. And, you know, I suppose in some capacity, we've had Nick Fury since the first film kind of introducing the Avengers Initiative, this whole idea that he is kind of this ringleader, bringing these people together to make this team, to be able to have the help that they need when big things might potentially happen. And we've seen him kind of popping in and out of the films over the course of this first phase. And this film, and we start with S.H.I.E.L.D. at kind of Project Pegasus as they're kind of going through this whole process of figuring out what's going on with the Tesseract and with Loki's arrival and everything. So really, S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of, to a certain extent, you could say, the bookends to this particular story. And they're really setting up this idea as Nick Fury, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they are kind of the connective tissue that brings these Avengers together to make this all come together and actually play in a way that works. And, you know, I suppose that in some capacity, when you're wanting to build a team story of heroes coming in to save the day, do we need to have S.H.I.E.L.D.? Like, is that something that needed to happen as opposed to just the heroes coming together and making their own little team? Or, because in the comic books, correct me, the Avengers really were just kind of their own little thing. They all kind of started working together. I don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. necessarily was a part of it initially, right?
No, in Avengers 1, it's just Loki getting Hulk to dress like a clown at a circus, and then other heroes realize we might need to deal with this.
The threat that no one hero could face alone.
Well, clowns are pretty scary. Oh my gosh, so good.
I'm hoping that was Avengers number 1, and I wasn't pulling, but I know. Yeah, it is. Okay, I just double checked. That is the plot of Avengers number 1.
Okay. Perfect.
So I've got a number of questions about the helicarrier here.
Yeah.
Particularly right now. So the scene that we have with Hill and Fury, how close is that to the events of the movie? Like, how many days removed or hours removed from the events of the film are we at this point?
Let me check the wiki. In the deleted scene, like the original open and close, and actually according to the wiki, this is all the very next day.
Okay.
So, the Battle of New York was on... no, I take it back. Battle of New York was on the 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Then the 5th. So it's actually several days later. The next day... See, it's all a little wonky because we have news reports and stuff. And even this, I mean, in our conversation that we're about to have, we have Tony and Pepper planning the reconstruction of Stark Tower. That's, according to the wiki, on the 5th. All of the stuff with Maria Hill is on the 6th. So...
Okay. So they real quick got some buckets and some scaffolding into the penthouse. Like, this is day 1. Like, we have got to get buckets and tarp and scaffolding in here. And then Maria Hill does her stuff. So my big question is, this helicarrier, or maybe it's a statement, this helicarrier shouldn't be in the sky. They should get this out of the sky and start doing repairs. What are they doing in the sky?
It's in Skydock, actually. There's a lot you can't see, but it's like actually hanging from larger shield infrastructure.
Right.
Well, this is something that we've talked about on the show. I mean, how do they land this now?
Yeah, there's a giant hole in the bottom.
Oh, you're right. It can't be a ship. So it has to be in the sky. They're like, we have to triage the repairs. We have to repair the hull. Then we can land and repair the engines.
And really, it's just a bunch of like shield caliber Visqueen taped on the bottom of that hole so that they can submerge it.
It's the flex
Not
seal.
A great plan.
Slap that right on.
They've got the guy slapping it on layer after layer, patch by patch. But yeah, like, I was just like, this thing, like, what are they doing up here right now? Like, everyone's at station. Like, Hill and Fury are on deck and everything, which led to my other question. I have to assume that there's some kind of quarters on the ship for people to, like, stay in, because they're not landing it every night or anything like that. There's not a ferry. There's not a shuttle bus that's taking people to and from. But do they have, like, a shift rotation? So is there, besides Fury, like, a deck commander for the swing shift? Is it like, if it's not Fury, but like, if it's not Fury, then who's in charge?
Or is it always just Fury? You mean like he never gets a break? Well, the problem is, I would imagine it would be Maria Hill, but the challenge with that is she's always next to Fury.
Yeah, exactly.
She never gets any downtime either.
They're on the same shift, so who's the other shift?
Yeah, this isn't great.
That's a target for an entire Disney Plus spin-off of, like, the night shift. Helicarrier : night shift.
That's where the Daniel Pudi character's just hanging out.
Yes.
Hitting up weird antics.
It's the lower decks of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And it's got to be like a skeleton crew. So there's only like 4 people on the whole thing. They're like, actually, our job is just to respond in case of emergency. We're basically just like watching the cameras. And so they're like playing ping pong on that weird shaped table in the back.
I mean, they're already playing video games during the day shift. We know this.
Doing the regular shift.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they could be, set up a net across the middle. And I mean, the middle is raised. They've got that thing. So they could have a really high, like, volleyball net, and they could be hitting the ball over.
Pickleball, volleyball, badminton.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I guess this does bring up something that, like, our big final shot. I mean, yes, we're going to go see the Avengers or Stark Tower with the A, implicitly going to become Avengers Tower. But it does spend a lot of time here for the end of the Avengers movie on S.H.I.E.L.D. and this helicarrier, and kind of acknowledging we don't actually know nor care where the actual heroes have gone at this point. And so it is, if the Avengers franchise was going to become more of the plug and play, like, okay, we've got this hero for this Avengers film and that one for that Avengers film, but we do have a core group of Avengers that's just kind of the Avengers for these MCU films at this point. So it seems a little odd to like drift away from our heroes and back onto S.H.I.E.L.D.
Does it feel like they're doing it specifically because they know that the next film is not going to be the Avengers 2, but that they're going to be jumping back across individual stories before we get to that? Is that kind of like in the meta? Is there, I feel like maybe what we're looking at is, and struggling with, is the nature of like this meta scripting that they're having to do here to explain the Avengers are here when we need them, but it's not always going to be big superhero, big team movies. We're going to have a lot of individual stories in between. Is that kind of why it feels this way?
Yeah, I think you're definitely onto something. And in the comic books, we just kind of accept that every month there's an Iron Man comic book where he's having his own adventure, and an Avengers comic book that he's going to appear in. I think those readers got used to those beats. But for singular big budget films that are spaced 6 months to a year apart from each other, it feels different, I think, than the comic book reading experience.
And then you get the extra complicated version of it in like the modern day, 10 years, like a full decade after this movie comes out. We have a movie with a character, and it might be like 3 or 4 years before you see that character interact with anybody else ever. I mean, like Shang-Chi came out years ago, and like, where is he? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's just so you get to a point where it's like few and far between, which is so antithetical to the comic books, where it's like, no, the comic books are constant. You're always getting something.
I guess obviously the big challenge there is it's very easy to have, a few people putting together a bunch of comic books every month, as opposed to the hundreds of people it takes to put a movie together over the course of a year or so. And so, I mean, I get that there's that kind of production side of it, but still, I think the point remains that it does still feel a little funky. And I think that I think the struggle is just that they had to script it in some way to kind of allow for that.
An Iron Man solo film where Nick Fury isn't just hanging around the corner and Hulk's ready to smash the bad guy too.
Exactly. One thing that, we've noticed in the past, Pete, as we were chatting about the conference room table in the back, but the fact that this room is designed with a giant shield, the eagle logo built into the floor itself, they try to kind of give it to us. And I don't think I've ever noticed until we've been talking about it for this show, but right at the very end of that, the boom up around 37 seconds after Maria's walked away, you actually can see it in the floor. You can see the eagle head in the distance, and all of the desks and everything that are kind of across the room set up to look kind of like it's the feathers in its wings.
Oh.
And it is kind of a cool little thing that it's really hard to see because there's so much stuff in it, but
until you get this isometric kind of angle,
this is the only time where you can really clearly go, oh yes, it is there.
But even then, I almost feel like the camera need to go a little higher to really make it clear, because I don't think I've ever noticed that till you're saying it now. Now that I'm looking at that image, I can see exactly what you're talking about. But it definitely doesn't grab you, in an arresting way when you see that visual on the screen.
But now that you've said it, I think it's a really great design element.
Yeah. They learned their lessons from Hydro Well. Put your logo everywhere.
Yeah. Branding synergy.
Yep.
And so where Fury's standing now, because I can see I paused on the moment that you were talking about with the eagle, as the whole floor. So Fury's workstation is back by the eagle's head. So is he just standing at? It's just like a viewpoint. It's just the lookout zone where he's at, or is there also a workstation where he's standing?
Like, does he have a desk? Does he have anything to actually do, or is he just watching the scenery?
Well, does Fury ever sit down? I don't think in this entire movie, I don't think he sits down.
So I'm looking at,
I don't think in this movie,
14 seconds, you can see him walking up. It really looks like he's just walking up to look out the window.
Yeah. It's just a scenic viewpoint, which, okay.
It's a bit of a boss move to just go claim that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is, because he's standing so far to the belly of the carrier, and now everyone is just looking at his hands folded behind his back. That is a power move, but kind of a silly thing not to have a chair.
Well, but it's definitely like a power spot, because remember, that spot that he's standing on is also, the floor itself is a window too. That's where he was standing when he and Hill were talking about the bloody card, and he was looking through that window below him when he saw Iron Man and the Quinjet take off to head to New York. And so it's also like a power move just in the fact that you're standing on a window in a plane, who knows how many thousands of feet up in the air. Like, I don't know, for me it'd be nauseating to try standing on that.
I mean, I think we all know there's some structural integrity issues that maybe have not been addressed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's even more of a power move. Yeah, like, I know the helicarrier's been under attack, and there's a hole in the bottom, and Hawkeye was shooting arrows, blowing up things right here in the deck, but I'm going to stand on this window anyway.
This glass is strong. I trust it.
I'm Nick Fury. Glass does not break for me until I tell it to break.
That's a lot of glass for the cleaning crew to regularly polish.
It's just the bugs. You got to be getting a lot of bugs smeared up on that.
Oh,
So many.
or birds.
And let's not forget, it's underwater, right?
Yeah,
like sometimes it's
moss,
submerged.
slime, barnacles.
There's algae.
I want to see barnacles stuck to that.
There's a green film growing on some sections.
It would probably start to cultivate some sort of new species of organism that can go from water to high altitude.
Exactly,
it's able
right?
to handle the significant environmental changes.
The helicarrier is pushing evolution forward. That is an angle I did not think we would reach.
The birth of the sky barnacles.
That's for an Ant-Man film when he's in the, when he's shrinking down into the microbial level.
Yeah.
So, do you know what's going on your windshield?
This is disgusting.
Oh, God. That's like those videos that you see on social media of, like, have you ever gone and looked at the surface of a strawberry in microscopic detail? And you're like, good God, no, I never want to eat the strawberry again after that. It's like, that's what their windows look like. Oh, wow. All right. Well, any last thoughts about anything going on here in the helicarrier with any of this? I know we'll talk a little bit more about it in tomorrow's minute, because we're going to talk about the alternate ending that goes along with it. But for the actual film itself, anything last here?
I will say the transition is actually a little awkward for me. And, Joss Whedon in his writing, he usually is very careful about his transitions, where, like, a line of dialogue, at the beginning when we're seeing where the gang all is, it'll say something like the soldier, and then we cut to Captain America. Soldiers fight wars, or something about we found it under the ocean, and then we cut to Iron Man's armor, under the sea. But at the very beginning of this minute, when it's just Nick Fury walking down a hall into the camera, and then the next shot is Nick Fury walking on deck with Maria Hill, like, it actually isn't a very smooth transition. I just want to say, I don't know what happened in the editing there, but
it feels like there was something that was cut, perhaps, between those two.
Oh, my. Yes.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, it is jarring. I agree.
I was going to mention something also from the very beginning of this minute, as Nick Fury's like walking through the hallway. The hall to his right, the wall is awfully scuffed.
It is very, very scuffed, yes.
And I don't have a good explanation for why that wall, as opposed to the other wall, which seems unscuffed.
Hulker.
Why one of these two walls is covered in, I don't know, grime, skid marks.
That attention to detail, Andrew, is why you're here.
I was going to say, it wouldn't be a Darowski guest minute if we weren't talking about the layout of a hall.
This hallway doesn't make any sense.
Because we had the Thor tunnels. We had some of the underground lab in Iron Man, I think.
We had Captain America in a base.
Oh, right, yeah.
I really, it makes me sad that you weren't here for Captain America discovering the storage room on the helicarrier. That would have been some tight podcasting with the Darowskis.
When I was rewatching it, I thought, we might have missed our minute here.
That's right.
I don't know. Somebody was moving some material down the hallway. It does not look like gunfire, right? It looks like a clumsy shield operative.
Couches and chairs, and just they're awkward, and you just drag it sometimes. So I've just moved apartments, and Joe helped with some of that, and so I'm totally familiar with the idea of, like, just dragging things waist high.
Wait a minute. I just want to know, did you just throw Joe under the bus as a lousy mover?
Scraped up the wall.
Is that
of the
what
new
just
apartment.
happened on the show?
I know a lot about watching out for such things. I don't know a lot about actually causing such situations to occur.
We would never, ever ding anything on the way in or out.
Never.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, the things we're learning on this show.
But that's what it made me think of. It was like it did look like moving scuff marks.
It's really interesting because in the scope of a story of like, okay, we want to show that the helicarrier has been, it's gone through a little bit of a battle. It was attacked by Hawkeye and the agents that were working with Loki earlier in the film, even though there were only 7 of them total. They certainly managed to do a lot of damage to the helicarrier. And it does make it seem like, yeah, we want to make sure that people know that this is the helicarrier and it's been under attack. And so they said, okay, let's put some scuff marks there just to make it look a little rougher. And so they did it. And it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, why would they have been fighting in this particular hallway? I'm not exactly sure. Either that or when they went to set and they looked at it and said, it looks kind of like a set. Can we do something to make it look a little, worn?
A little more lived in.
Sure. Somebody brought a piano through and scraped up the wall.
It's such a tricky balance because like it's supposed to be new, right? Like towards the beginning of the film, like I don't know that it's like the first time it's ever flown, but it's like, okay, this is a relatively new helicarrier.
It's never been attacked by gods before.
No, I think that's fair.
And so it's just like, okay, we need to show that it's not new anymore. But how do you do that? Well, it's like appropriately damaged, right? Not naturally damaged, just like high intensity. This is not lived in. This is high intensity for a short time.
Not lived in, not scuffed, but actively war zoned.
Mm-hmm. And, some of the locks are broken by Steve Rogers. And
it's one of those things, though, like, if it was a different hallway, I suppose that it would have made some more sense. But the fact that it's just this one, I guess, especially because, we've talked about this a lot with the helicarrier in relation to comparable battleships, where those hallways are not only really, really short, but they're also really narrow. And so you can understand why there might be scuff marks in hallways on a battleship, because they're carrying big things through very small, tight passageways. Whereas this, I mean, it's a Fury-sized passage. Like it is carrying his full sense of Furiness here. Like he needs a big hallway. But at the same time, it does seem like they decided to make it really seem like something that would be on a tight battleship.
These flaring coattails do not touch the wall.
It would really change the dynamic of this moment if he was like ducking under pipes and like leaning his head from one side to the other and then like turning sideways a little bit.
I've got to say, I was legitimately a little sad that we weren't going to take a few minutes to break down the logistics of how characters got from point A to point B and what something looked like, but we have scratched that itch. I appreciate this.
We got it.
Here we are. Oh, you missed the earlier minute where we're like, so Fury leaves the bridge and he ends up on the top deck with a bazooka.
Yeah, wait.
Is there an elevator with a bazooka in it?
Well, because we discovered that there are door bazookas. There are always a stash of door bazookas.
Yes. Everywhere, Fury's very into bazookas. They're all over the ship. He's got,
And don't forget, there was an entire, I don't know how many episodes we talked in a row of pipes that were disconnected, but just sitting in the ceiling that are constantly falling on people when the helicarrier shakes.
The real architectural masterpiece of the helicarrier is the storage capabilities.
Oh, yeah. The Indiana Jones, the storage room for all of the artifacts that it has.
Just carry it with it.
Absolutely.
Oh, my gosh. This thing is crazy. All right. Let's shift gears. We go from this conversation with Fury and Hill. As Pete, you already pointed out, Hill gets the walk away. She walks away, and we see the bird on the floor. And then we cut to blueprints. We're now looking at blueprints, very fancy blueprints, and we turn out to be in Stark Tower in the penthouse with Tony and Pepper as they're looking at these things. It's a fun little sequence. We get these crazy Stark style blueprints. What do you think of this?
Does everyone else think of Minority Report anytime you see like people interacting with tech by waving their hands?
All the time. Yes.
That's a good call.
Yeah, it's totally that. And but it's interesting because is this the first time we've seen him doing something that's actually like not glass, but it's kind of like a black surface?
Like a freestanding hologram table?
I like the texture as he rolls it out. Like, it seems thick enough that it could be holding, circuitry within it. So I think that's really good, like, prop design.
Yeah, there's something interesting in the way that they construct this. Because, yeah, like blueprint paper, it's always kind of that bluish white paper that it's on, but this is a little different. It's kind of that high-tech black matted sort of look. And you're right, it does kind of have this kind of chunky rollout as it goes.
The texture and heft of it reminds me of the like fold up iPad covers that almost everybody has, where it like folds into like a triangle to prop it up.
Right. This is, what's really interesting about this, there's a lot going on here in terms of future tech that I find really fascinating, because I, for a long time, have been deeply into rollable screens, and Samsung has them, and Mobis has done a great a demo on them. You can watch on YouTube. Hyundai is starting to use all these curved screens. Like, they're really pioneering like how you can put screens everywhere. And this movie was sort of, planting a sign here that says, like, this is something that we're going to be able to do, even though we can't do it today. And it looks very much like the sort of color e-ink rollable screen that we have, all of us, in our future. We'll be able to wrap screens around everything that we want to wrap screens in, and they can be on crazy crazy odd angles, and stuff will happen. And then he throws in this like hologram tech, right? Being able to like pull the thing out into the air above the screen. And that's like a whole different layer of multi-angle projection that should not be possible in this thing. But you can kind of see, because they're using all the constituent elements of things that various companies are working on, that it could be, this could be a thing that we can plausibly do. And I think it's just fascinating. I just get very, very excited every time I see this. You roll out a screen for me and I'm, man, I will just whistle all day. I just love it. I don't know why I go with whistling all day. Like, I feel like that's a weird thing for me to choose to do. There are other things that I might do better.
This is the first time I noticed a little detail about what he is working on specifically. So if you go to like second 44 or 45 in it, when he like spreads out a deck of blueprint elements, they each in the upper right corner have one of the Avengers symbols. And so I think he's laying out the bedrooms.
Yeah, it's interesting because then he taps the one and opens it, and it's Captain America's. I guess you can see it when the file, we'll just call it, it gets larger. It does say in the bottom, it says sleeping quarter 6. So yeah, I think that he's designing it so they each have their own little sleeping quarters. It's kind of cool.
You can look at it. You can see his bed, 2 end tables, a desk, toilet, shower.
I think I see his toilet. Yeah. That is America's toilet.
Is that his closet with the big X on it? I don't know.
I thought that might be the shower, but
now
I don't know.
This is another moment where like we're gonna go from this quick zoom in, and when you're watching it minute by minute, this is the sort of thing that's like jumps out at you. The very next shot is like, what happened to everything that we were just looking at on this table? It's suddenly a very clean.
As Pepper like raises it up.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're down at the other end where Pepper is. I guess. It does seem
they're like holding each other.
But yeah.
Well.
Oh, you're right. He comes from behind her.
But where were they? Because they were right next to each other a second ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's on her right, and then he comes around her to stand on her left.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you can see, like, when it unrolls, she's on her right. She's at the head of the table, we'll say. He's on the long end of the table, and he unrolls it, starts tapping it and pulling files and everything. And then we cut to her, presumably still at the end of the table, and then he comes from the side. Like, and then when the camera starts pulling out, suddenly they're both at the long side of the table. So all of it is like cut together in a very oddly structured way.
And none of those smaller ones that we were looking at are on this big table, and as it starts to pull out.
No, yeah.
And there's 3 rolled up blueprints to the side of the table.
Yeah, it's weirdly cut together in a way where we're not paying attention because by this point people are, starting to kind of put their coats on and take those last sips of their sodas.
Near the end of this minute, they swipe away the holograph that she lifts up, and then they immediately start swiping it away just to look cool. Obviously, they're not learning anything from this because it's up for a grand total of 1 second. But I think there was like a spare swipe near the end that the hologram's already gone. Or he just does a little motion with his hand, whereas I think the direction must have been like, just act like you're touching something. We're going to add it all in post. But then there's nothing there at the very end.
And then they close it.
Right. Yeah, it's funny.
You know what? I do love that they actually show you where the Quinjet is going to sit in the building. That's just one of the things that I really like, that little nod. Look at the little Quinjet inside the building. It's just going to fall out of the building whenever it takes off.
Well, and you can see, like, earlier, like, when he first unrolls it, like, one of the images that does pop up is the new Quinjet. Like, he's already working on that. And when we do cut to Pepper, like, right at the very top edge of the screen, it does say side elevation Quinjet. So it's clear, like, he's thinking about so many of these different things for what he's going to do now that he's part of the team. And I guess that's the idea here, is, like, Tony's not just Stark anymore. He's actually part of a team.
I just have to go back to, like, the scaffolding and the tarp and the buckets. Who brought that all up? Why isn't anyone doing any work right now?
Well, clearly on a break.
Did they say, okay, everyone scram, we're going to do some planning on our fancy blueprints in a dusty workspace without a window?
Yeah.
Okay, this really does seem like Tony Stark's just trying to show off the blueprints. They're not actually doing anything with it, because I just timed it. She lifts it up, and he has swiped it away within 10 seconds. Like, no, we're not... We're not actually looking at the blueprints now. You saw the cool glowy bits.
He doesn't want her to see something. He's like, don't look at that.
But yeah, like the setup of the penthouse now with all the stuff in there, but nobody's doing any work. It looks like an aluminum pallet full of barrels. I've never seen a pallet made of metal like that.
Also unsecured near a giant open hole in the building.
I know, if that drops down.
Yeah.
Imagine the paint splatter.
We have also chronicled, however, that this movie doesn't care about things falling on people. Like, that's just never been a concern.
Very true.
But he did set up his blender. So they've got power running to this location, and he's got his blender going. So he's got the priorities. I would just be worried about, like, all the plaster dust getting on my blueprints and in my drink. And
the things that Tony clearly doesn't think about. It is funny. And again, this is all like just a couple days later, and they've already had a whole team come up and start very quick. And I guess it's Tony. He's got the money to get people in right away. But yeah, why did they set everything up and then disappear?
They've got a bunch of like workspace lights, but the lights clearly work.
They're all plugged in.
Yeah.
Like the overhead lighting still works. So they don't actually need the like construction lighting.
I will say those look like halogen lights, so I do understand why the window's open.
It gets so hot.
Oh, things get very hot. Yeah, that's true.
Although we haven't really talked about the fact that this is pretty high up, and with a window out like this, you would imagine they would have a lot of wind like rushing into their space here.
That plastic sheeting would just be constantly fluttering.
Right. They're not nary a flap as we watch this.
Nary a flap, you poser.
I'm starting to wonder if they filmed this really up high for real on a skyscraper. I'm starting to think maybe it wasn't on location.
They are totally trying to fake us out here.
Yeah.
Jeez.
This minute is when we learn it wasn't a documentary.
I bet that's not even natural sunlight.
I'm just, what? I know we're probably near the very tail end, but I'm just looking at this last shot as we're like pulling out. What are these construction crews doing with this combination of ladders and plastic sheeting and halogen lighting?
And so many buckets and so much cement, like those bags full of, I assume, cement to mix up.
Well, and the buckets of, is it paint, I guess, that they're doing? Maybe they could be, I guess, the cement may be repairing the hole in the floor where Hulk tossed, kind of made with Loki.
So that all tracks, but they don't need ladders for that.
No, and I'm trying to remember, like, did we even see damage to the ceiling? Like, the only damage, let's see, we had Tony blast Loki through the window and then into the back wall. We had Jarvis call up the Mark 7 and break through its door.
And the window, and the door, yeah.
Oh, so if it broke through the door, I think you can see that broken door in the back.
Yep, the back, right. Yep, that's back there. Loki tossed Tony through the window, which is why we have the broken windows here. And then Hulk came smashing through also. But then when Hulk, I mean, really, it's he hits Loki once, and Loki again hits into the back of the room, and then he does his whole puny god smash into the floor. But that's kind of it. It's like this is a lot more damage than likely there is to the actual space.
Or a lot more repair work than I think would actually be necessary. Because, yeah, the ceiling shouldn't need anything. I doubt those ladders are necessary.
Well, how else do they hang up the giant sheets of visqueen?
if you're working for Tony Stark, you just kind of put lots of stuff around and slow roll through, right?
What I love about these ladders, though, is look at the ladder. The ladders have glowing blue lights on them, and these are Iron Man suit ladders. You have to imagine these came out of a briefcase somehow.
It does look like that. I noticed the blue light, and I wasn't going to mention anything, but since you mentioned it, did those ladders fly up to this penthouse?
Yes. Answer is yes. And you don't need permission. You don't have to hold back and wait for weirdness to be broached on the show. I feel like you should know that by now.
But yeah, I've never seen a ladder that looked quite like this.
What are those things? It just
are these
such a strange?
Are these robot ladders? They just go where Tony tells them, and he's doing all the repairs himself.
I mean, the set designer was just make it visually interesting. No one's ever going to dig into this. Just get a few layers of depth of field and throw a little bit of pop a light here and there, and no one will even care. It's just, this is the big breath at the end of the film. Everyone, no one's looking at this closely.
Exactly. Yeah, and here we are.
But then there's just a regular wheelbarrow. Why is that wheelbarrow not Repulsor Tech wheelbarrow?
Not a smart barrow. The other piece that I have a challenge with is that she particularly Pepper, she is wearing these beige sort of nude colored flats, and there is still, if you look off to the left side of the floor.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
I think she's barefooted again.
I don't think she's barefooted, and only because I have looked at this a lot, because originally I thought she was barefooted. But I am going full screen, and she is not barefooted. There is a lot of rubble and glass still on the floor.
Oh, there is.
And this
Look at that.
Feels so dangerous. There's this is a tetanus appointment ready to happen.
I think you're right. I think she is wearing a very minimal nude colored shoe.
I agree with that.
But it's hard to tell, even full screen.
But I didn't really notice the shards on the left and right of their little workstation. Which, again, how did Tony get to the other end of that workstation? Now I'm really getting frustrated because I just scrubbed it again.
I think it doesn't make sense, but it's these moments are supposed to be reversed, but that wouldn't make any sense for the shot zooming out.
Well, and also, I mean, the shots themselves don't cut together. Even the shot of him where he's, where he just rolled the blueprint out and he starts tapping on it, when it cuts to that overhead shot, the next shot, that doesn't, nothing lines up.
Right.
We're looking at the training area. We have the Avengers Tower training area that we have on screen there. That wasn't on the previous screen. And those files that he pops up, they would be over whatever he first is tapping on and the Quinjet image. And those aren't there when he switches. So it's almost like they came up with some cool shots, but none of them actually cut together exactly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think
yeah.
those shots where we just see hands, do you think that's actually Gwyneth Paltrow and Robert Downey Jr., or do you think they have stand-ins just doing some of that handwork on the
we
blueprints?
See it cut, when she lifts up the holograph. That's definitely her.
So hers, yeah.
We see Pepper, but Tony.
When they roll him out, you can't see enough, and then Tony's hands.
Yeah, the unroll could be anyone.
Yeah, that might not be him.
That might be just, hey, we need something. We need this to look cooler. Someone go unroll this. Yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah, that's kind of a hand. And the hand that's tapping, the way that middle finger works, that's a hand model, is what we're saying.
That's not just an actor. That's a hand actor.
But they probably studied Robert Downey Jr.'s gestures so they could replicate it.
I'm sure.
Exactly.
Sure of it. Yeah. Method hand acting.
Only the finest for the final moments of the Avengers. All right. Well, let's wrap up minute 133. We're going to have more of a conversation with you to talk about tomorrow in minute 134. So what are you two working on these days? Do you have anything you want to plug for everybody?
Yeah, I'm still hosting the Protagonist Podcast, and Andrew is the producer over there and a frequent guest, where each week we talk about a great character in a great story. And we keep it eclectic and try and bounce around to different kinds of stories. And each month we try and cover a comic book, a TV show, a film, and a novel that we're going to have a discussion about. And again, that's just called the Protagonist Podcast.
And in addition to producing that, I work on Disney Animation Minute Essentials, which is a Movies by Minutes podcast for Disney animated films. I do that with my wife, Kestra.
And both of those are hosted on the Dueling Genre network of podcasts.
Well, we will have links for those in the show notes to check that out, everybody. And thank you both so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be back with you tomorrow for minute 134. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Oh, God, Andy, do you just wonder what are they going to do with this building next? I guess we'll never know.
We'll never know. Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.